I didn't expect too many people to spend their Tuesday night dealing with suffering. I think reading the newspapers is sufficient, but I'm very, very happy because this is one of the most important issues we have not only in Judaism, but in all religions. But Carol asked me to do the right thing before we begin and just ask people to introduce themselves. If I were cruel, I would have asked you why you chose to come to a class that deals with suffering, but that we may choose to wait a little bit until we get some background on the subject. So let's start.
I'm Ann Wallace, and I'm here because I'm addicted to Tuesday nights at the temple.
Oh, thank you.
I didn't want to miss this one.
I'm happy you're here. Thank you.
I'm Jerry Kalora, and I just love these conversations with you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
I'm a Berman, and I'm happy to be here to listen to you. Hillary Ruppberg.
Michael Ruppberg.
Let's go to
Diane Flugel. I enjoy your classes.
Len Levy, and we enjoyed the other program, and we expect to do the same here.
Of the word, I enjoyed the programming earlier as well.
Any of them. Careful. Like to be here every Tuesday.
We love when you're here every Tuesday and Friday.
I can pass this down as you talk, so that people.
Annie Sousa, and you're so generous with information, and we love to be here.
Ron Sousa, ditto.
Carol Carswell. Karen Feller.
Cy Halper.
Howard Schofield.
Judy Skurnick, and we enjoyed last class.
Norm Skurnick.
Michelle Walter, and I'm here because my neighbor invited me, and I've brought her a few times, Audrey, and also I played canasta this past week, and it was so lovely, and everyone was so welcoming, and I just really appreciated the atmosphere.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Audrey, and I thought I was coming to a discussion group, but this is much, much better, and I've learned something exciting every single time I've come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Tuttle, and my neighbor Audrey caught my ear one day, and she told me about one of the lectures, and I was like, wow, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. And she said, would you like to come? And I said, sure. So here I am again. Thank you.
Hi, Isabel Berg. It's our first class.
Steve Berg, the men's group told me what a wonderful session it would be, so I'm giving it a try.
Arthur Levine.
Lori Levine.
Linda Wolf. Diane Piver.
Carol Meschel.
Yes.
Estelle Milchman. Pam Gladstone.
Janet Erany.
Edward Livingston, and I think you're the most awesome rabbi I've ever met.
Thank you. Now I know I'll never ask people to do it again. So in the past, I don't know, few months, we did something completely different from what we're going to do tonight. We studied the history of the Zionist movement that eventually led to the foundation of the State of Israel. We moved slower than I had anticipated, and we stopped at 1948 instead of 2025. And I had to be honest with myself and with you. I said, I need a break with that. You know, especially when you talk about Israel, it's a living thing. And you open the paper, the American paper, and all you read about is Israel, the Middle East. And I needed a break. And for some reason, I decided to deal with this subject. Actually, it's not for some reason. It's a subject that I've been studying for myself for many, many years. I find it fascinating. And I think that since October 7th, and many other things in our lives, I spent even more time thinking about it. And the trigger, I think, was about 3-4 months ago when a friend of a friend called me and said, "You don't know me. I came to a few bar mitzvahs in your temple. I need your help." I said, "Sure, what do you need?" He said, "My 31-year-old son just died." And it affected me. I never met the son. I did know the father. And it affected me more than any other death that I experienced in the past 25 years of being a rabbi. I don't know why, but I just didn't know what to do with it. Not with the service. The service is not a hard thing, but really with myself, to be honest with myself, honest about my understanding of God, of justice. And I know all the answers, but I just couldn't articulate to anyone, let alone to myself, how do you make sense of that? Just one morning, this 31-year-old young man just didn't wake up. So I decided to invite anyone who wanted to join me into this journey. And the way I typically deal with any kind of an issue is chronologically. I like to start with the Torah, because this is the foundation of the Jewish faith. Start with the Torah and see what the Torah has to say about it. And that's what we'll do today, Torah and the rest of the Bible. And then to the rabbinic writings of the Mishnah, the Talmud, etc., and eventually to modern theologians and philosophers who wrote especially after the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust changed a lot. A lot of the answers that we will deal with and see, you can somehow understand, but the Holocaust was a watershed. It was, well, all these old answers don't really work. 6 million Jews were just killed, a third of the Jewish people. We need something new. We need other answers, okay? But let's start from the beginning. The assumption in Judaism is that God is omnipotent, all-powerful. God has unlimited power. Second, God is omniscient, or omniscient if you're on the other side of the pond, which means all-knowing. God knows everything. And the third is that God is good. God is a benevolent God. If that's the case, how can there be evil in the world? How come this 31-year-old young man just died? This is not good. Now, if you take only one thing of this three-legged stool away, you can answer. Let's say that God is not all-powerful. You can say that there are things that God cannot do. Many things God can do, but when it comes to death, when it comes to big fires, God cannot do it. Okay, so we understand. There are things that are too big for even God. But that's not really the Jewish understanding. Or you can say that God is not all-knowing. Yeah, God has all the power in the world, but as we know, having the power does not mean that you have the knowledge of how to deal with it. So let's say God is super powerful, but doesn't understand cancer, doesn't have the idea of how to do it. He created us with some imperfections and just doesn't know it. But we believe that God knows everything. The third one is scary. God is not so good. Or at least, God is amoral. So when I look at this case of the young man who died, for me it's evil, it's awful. But maybe God looks at it differently. Okay? But if we hold these three concepts of God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and completely benevolent, we have a challenge here. And of course, we're not the first to think about it. Okay, so we will try to answer this really difficult question. let's start with our foundations. Open the Bible. First story after the creation, first human beings are Adam and Eve, right? We all know this story. God told them not to eat from the tree, and they ate. Okay? First case of disobedience. Let's read from the book of Genesis, chapter 3. To the woman, he in this case is God, said, I will greatly increase your pangs in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children, yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. In any case, first punishment, suffering. What's the cause of suffering? Disobedience. What happens before that? Where did Adam and Eve live before? Paradise, Garden of Eden, perfect place. No pain, no suffering, no hard work. Apparently, women gave birth without any pain. Everything was smooth and nice, just the way God created the world. But the first case of disobedience, God said, whoops, if you don't play according to the rules, I'm going to punish you. So the first cause, or the first text we have that deals with suffering is punishment. Disobeyed God. You did something bad, I will do something bad to you. And this is quite tempting to think like that. This is the Santa Claus God, right? Or concept. He looks at you, he knows what you do. If you're good, you get all the gifts you want. If you're bad, you get coal, right? This is, by the way, very dangerous. And in conversations with people, it's one of the main reasons that people tell me we don't believe in God. Because the God that they were brought up believing it is this kind of a God. Right? This very simplistic notion of justice. You're good, good things will happen to you. You're bad, bad things will happen to you. That's it. And then we grow up and see, oops, doesn't work like that. So what do? You have two options. Either to throw God out of the window, or to say, maybe this is too childish of an understanding of God, and I need to challenge myself. But maybe you won't be amazed, but in the beginning of being a rabbi, I was amazed how many people choose not to believe in God only because of that. Bad things happen, there is no God, period. Any comments about that so far? We continue in the book of Genesis, and the next human beings we meet are the children of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. Okay, remember the story. Both of them, brothers, offered a sacrifice to God. God happily accepted Abel's offering and rejected Cain's offering. First case of jealousy. Cain was so jealous at his brother who got God's attention. He got nothing from God. His brother, God received God's thank you, and he was so jealous. Jealousy often progressed to anger, to violence, and Cain killed his brother. Why there is suffering? Because we have some problematic emotions that we don't know what to do with, like jealousy, okay? Like violence. So Cain was not able to control himself, and he ended up killing. Still, why did God punish? Because we messed up. We did something wrong. The story continues now from this little family, primordial family, into many years later. Now there are many people in the world. This is the story of the flood narrative. The third source, okay? The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great on the earth, and that every inclination of thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings I have created, people together with animals and creeping things and birds of the air. So I am sorry that I have made them. Wow, not a happy God here, okay? God created the world as an act of grace, love. Nobody told God he had to do it. We don't know why God did it. We definitely did not do anything to deserve being created, okay? But God is in an act of grace. I know that grace is not a word that we Jews use a lot, even though it appears so often in the Bible and the prayer book, but it sounds almost not Jewish today. But grace and love. Grace actually means that we get something good without doing anything to justify it. Okay, so birth is the best example. I was born, I don't know why I was born, why me, and not many other options of my parents getting together. Okay, many things that we have, our intellect, I didn't do anything to deserve the intellect. I mean, some of us studied more or studied less, but the way we look, I mean, that's all grace. That's the idea of grace, in contrary to other things. So when I use the word grace, is God just gave us things. So God creating of the world is the first act of grace. But God had a plan for the world. He wanted people to behave nicely, according to the rules. And several generations later, he looked down and said, these people just don't do it right. And he regretted for doing it. And that's an interesting thing, regret. Okay, God said, I wish I hadn't done it. It's not just a punishment. God said, why did I need the whole thing? I was so nice. I was good. I was benevolent. And look at them.
God made a mistake, he said.
God said he made a mistake. Absolutely.
A new concept.
It's not new. It's actually in the Torah. God said, I wish I didn't do it. Wait, that's not the end of the story. We're not studying Bible here. But we know God brought the flood, and everyone died except of Noah and his family. And then after God destroyed everyone and everything, God again said, oops, I've made a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. That's not the way to deal with problems, just to ruin everything, to kill everyone, to destroy and start all over. Okay? So that's, in the book of Genesis in particular, God is more human than in other books of the Bible. God is more a character with whom we can identify. So we know it. Sometimes we do something really good for someone, and then all we get is complaints and ingratitude. And I wish I didn't do it, right? So it's easy to identify with God of Genesis. He's more of the parent type of a God. But in the story of the flood, again, very clearly, God looked at the people, didn't behave the way they should have, and killed them all. The end of the book of Genesis is the longest narrative in the entire Hebrew Bible. This is the story of Joseph and his brothers. Remember the story? Did you see the musical? No, it's a really good one. And the story goes like that. It's important. It's different than what I said before. Jacob our third and last patriarch, had 12 children or 12 sons. We know only of one daughter, but perhaps he had more, because the Bible mentions women only when it is necessary, normally when something bad happened. Okay, in this case, the daughter was denied, she was raped, and it's a whole story. And in any case, we know about 12 sons from 4 wives. But one of them he loved more than all the others, Rachel. Rachel died after giving birth to the second son, to Benjamin. Her first son was Joseph. So Jacob loved Joseph more than he loved all the other children, and he was not embarrassed about it. On the contrary, he made it very clear to the world that Joseph was his favorite son. The rest of the brothers were jealous, and they hated Joseph. Not only for that, Joseph was not really the nicest guy, at least not in the beginning. They hated him so much that they decided to kill him, and then eventually they ended up selling him into slavery to the Egyptians. So now we have this wonderful Joseph who started really well with the coat of many colors, being his father's favorite, to a slave in Egypt. Not a great thing. But good things happened to Joseph, and he was sold to an important man by the name of Potiphar, and very quickly he became the head of his household. Potiphar trusted him with everything. There was only one problem there. Potiphar's wife fancied Joseph. And when Joseph refused to spend the night with her, she accused him for trying to rape her. So Joseph is going back to prison. Okay? In prison, he got himself the reputation of a dream solver. There were some people there of funny dreams, and Joseph knew how to solve their dreams correctly. And one day the Pharaoh had a weird dream. He knew that there was an important message in the dream, and nobody in Egypt, all the very smart people there, were not able to interpret it correctly. And then somebody said, you know, when I was in prison, there was this little Jewish guy, he's good. Let's try. Pharaoh invited Joseph, tells him the story. Joseph knows how to interpret it correctly. He tells the Pharaoh that the meaning of your story is that Egypt and the whole area, the entire Middle East, is going to have 7 good years, financially speaking. Okay, and in that time it means rain and grain. And then these 7 good years will follow by 7 bad years. Think that somebody is telling you that the market is going to be really, really good for a while, and then one day it's going to crash, and you get this day. Okay, that's more or less the story. The Pharaoh likes it and saves all the grain he could during the 7 good years, and then when the 7 bad years starts, nobody around was prepared, because you just assumed that good year will follow another good year, another good year, another good years. But when it crashed, the Pharaoh was ready. And who was in charge of all the grain in Egypt? Well, Joseph. Joseph's brothers lived in Canaan, which is Israel today, had to buy food, and the only place to buy food was Egypt. So they schlepped to Egypt, and who is there selling the food? Of course, Joseph. He recognized them immediately, but they did not recognize him. Okay, he was an Egyptian guy. They thought that he had died. So there is a little back and forth, and at the very end of that saga, not the very end, the end of the back and forth, Joseph cannot hold his tears anymore, and he said, I'm Joseph, your brother. Is my father still alive? And then they said, yes, he's still alive. He brings the entire family to Egypt, treats them very well, gives them land and everything they needed. That was all the background to what we're going to learn, because still it's about suffering. It's not about another narrative in the Bible. the brothers apparently never believed that Joseph forgave them. They thought that he treated them well to honor their father, Jacob. They assumed that the minute Jacob dies, revenge will take place. Jacob dies, and they came up with a plan. They went to Joseph and said to him, "We heard the father saying just before he died that you should not treat us poorly. It never happened." And now let's read. Genesis 50:20. He said, "Even though you intended to do harm to me," right, trying to kill me, sold me into slavery, "God intended it for good, in order to bring about this present result that many people should be kept alive." Said, yes, you tried to explain, you thought that you did something bad, and from your perspective it was something bad. You took your brother and sold him into slavery. That's really bad. But God, if you try to look at the entire picture, at God's plan, it's actually good. God did it. It was not your choosing to sell me. God wanted me to spare the lives of millions of people by providing them with food. So it's not you, it's part of God's plan. How is that little story related to the question of suffering?
We don't understand always why there's a larger plan.
We don't understand, or often or sometimes we don't understand God's plan, and what seems to us as bad might be, in historical perspective, for example, actually good. This is not my opinion. So some people say, no, the Holocaust was very bad, but without the Holocaust, we wouldn't have had the state of Israel. I don't think it's true. But this is a very popular thing that people are saying. So if you just look at the Holocaust, of course, that's the most horrible thing that ever happened. But if you look now, 80 years later, wow, that was part of God's plan. Again, not my opinion, so please, please, please. It's something that you keep hearing and reading, okay? But this is the, no pun intended, but the genesis of this idea. When things seem to be bad at the moment, it might be actually a good thing when we look at the end result or the big plan of God. Okay? So if the first stories in the Bible were very clear, bad things happen to people who do bad things. So Adam and Eve disobeyed God, they were punished. Cain killed his brother, he was punished. The people or the generation of the flood were evil, they were punished. Okay, very simple. Here we see a step forward with this notion. Well, bad things happen, but maybe they're not so bad. Or even if we think they're bad, they're part of a big plan which is essentially good. Remember, God is all good. Okay? Because if you say God is not all good, what's the problem? So he was sold into slavery. But if God is all good, you have to find an answer. And this is one of them. That many people, and not only Jewish people, still hold to be true. Okay? We think it was bad, but it's actually not.
What if he's punishing himself? He's all powerful, he can punish himself, and that's his punishment.
You're talking about God? That God punishes himself? We will get to it in the modern era. No, this is very serious, because we have, even in the Talmud, we see references to the idea that God suffers. God makes God's self-suffering. God is crying. Okay, we will get to something similar to what you're saying, but we're not ready for that. This is the advanced, but okay, no, that's a very, very good point. Any questions, comments, anything? Okay, well, I always in my classes include much more text than I'm intending to cover, not because I'm optimistic or anything, but some of you would like to go later on and to look at it. Okay, so I included Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah, which has the theme all the time that God is telling the people, if you follow my rules, good things will happen. If you don't, bad things will happen. So there are a few quotes, there's a whole few chapters in the book of Deuteronomy. But I want to continue the next page to Isaiah. I don't know how many of you read the book of Isaiah, but I do want to go to Isaiah 53. I think that if you are a serious Christian, this is probably, is it hot? If you are a serious Christian, Isaiah 53 is one of the chapters in the Jewish Bible that you know very, very well. If you're a Jew, probably not. No, because we just don't learn these parts of Isaiah so often. What is chapter 53 of Isaiah? Does anyone want to read? I will. Okay, so you have, oh. I don't need it. You do because the people in the house. This is not for the room, but the people in the house. We normally have many, many people who watch us. That's why I'm worrying that it's not for...
It doesn't seem like it's on, but it is, right?
It is.
Oh, thank you.
It goes to the people on the Zoom.
Okay. Isaiah 53. Surely he has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases, yet we accounted him stricken, struck down by God and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the punishment that made us whole, and by his bruises we are healed.
Okay, so one of the biggest arguments between Jews and Christians is who is he? Jews don't know of Jesus, or at least didn't know of Jesus. There was no Jesus during the time of Isaiah. Okay, we're talking about 800 years before there was Jesus.
But Isaiah
Don't confuse this is all Jewish Bible, okay? The Christians, or the Jews who became Christians later on, said that the he in this chapter is a person. And when you read it, you see how perfectly it fits the story of Jesus. Jesus was perfect. Jesus did not do anything wrong. Why did Jesus suffer? You see it here in this verse. But he was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the punishment that made us whole, and by his bruises we are healed. Okay, this is the suffering servant. So for Christians today, this is all about Jesus. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah. One day God sent a person by the name of Jesus who was punished, who suffered, not because he did anything wrong. He didn't. He did everything right. But God chose him to suffer in order to heal our sins. So he suffered for our sins, for our wrongdoings. This is super simplification of Christianity. But it's important here, because this is from the Jewish Bible, okay? 800 years before Jesus. So that's where it all comes from. The Jews read Isaiah 53 not as a story about a particular man, but he is the people of Israel. we, the Jewish people, suffer on behalf of the world, on behalf of everyone else. Look at us. I mean, it's not that God hates us. God loves us. But God chose us to suffer, to expiate for the sins of the other nations. Okay? Now, this is not a comparative religion class. I keep threatening to teach one, and I will, because it's fascinating. But I just want to show you where it came from. The idea that one can suffer not because what he or she did, but because of what other people did. So one's suffering can help other people atone for their sins. Okay? So I know that even in this room, most of us are more familiar with the argument as it sounds in Christianity. Jesus died for our sins. Okay? But here, Isaiah was talking, or at least the way I learn it as a Jew, or Israel suffered, or that's what Isaiah believed, for the sake of everyone's sins. The suffering servant. Okay? This is, theologically speaking, a crucial concept here. Now, this idea that one can suffer for others will get many different forms. For example, children may suffer for their parents' sins, right? They are good, but, but we will see more and more. That's what the rabbis in the Talmud talk much more about. That will be next time. I had some more. The next passages I included are quite well known for Jews because we like to study the prophets, especially when they condemn us for our social sins. Okay, so Isaiah 1:16, that used to be the Haftorah, or still is in the Reform movement, not in the Orthodox. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphans, plead for the widow. This is social action. This is tikkun olam. Okay? This was the message of the prophet that we took. So why we are punished? Not necessarily because of our personal sins, but because we allow our society to be so corrupt. We live in a society, we support a society, or at least we do not oppose a society that has all these social illnesses, taking advantage of the weak, of the orphans, of the widows, of the poor, of the strangers. Okay? In other words, and Micah, the last one, Micah 6:8, puts it even more pointedly when he says, He, again, God has told you, O mortal, what is good and what does the Lord inquire of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and walk humbly with your God. Before he said what God wants, he said what God doesn't really care about, and this is sacrifices. He said, don't think that you can just offer all these animals and have all these celebrations if you are a corrupt society. So why is there a suffering according to many of the prophets? Not because necessarily individual sins. It's not that if I suffer, I did something wrong. I can be a perfectly good person, but I live in a society that is corrupt. Okay, the line that was attributed to many people, including Elie Wiesel, is that for evil to flourish, you need good people to do nothing. Okay? So we don't need a society of only evil people. But if there are enough evil people and the rest are bystanders, stand idly by, seeing all the evil, well, that's when God punishes everyone, not just the evildoers. but we are punished collectively as a society. Okay, so this is another look at reasons for that. Let's go to Ecclesiastes, one of my favorite books. If you're a tiny bit cynical, go and read Ecclesiastes. You'll love it. Okay? I just chose a few verses here. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Just from this first line, what can you say? There's no meaning to anything. Stop asking yourself why there's evil. No, everything is just vanity. Vanity is the English word. The Hebrew word is much better. Is hevel. Hevel is the air that comes out of your mouth when you breathe, when you talk, meaning hot air. In probably the closest in English, right? Means nothing. We think all our talking, all our things are, no, there's no meaning. You know, let's look at the next one. He said, for the fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and humans have no advantage over the animals, for all is vanity. You know, we think so much about the meaning of life, about the purpose, about our achievement, about our... Nonsense. He said the cow does not really think about its major achievements of the past 7 years. I mean, and we can kid ourselves and think that our life has a meaning, but no. We eat, we sleep, we die, just like the cow. Okay? The amazing thing about Ecclesiastes is the fact that the rabbis chose to include it in the Bible, because it goes against everything they've been teaching. Because they'd say, no, life is meaningful. We have to find meaning in life. We have to have purpose. And here Ecclesiastes, no. Okay? There is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people who are treated according to the conduct of the wicked, and there are wicked people who are treated according to the conduct of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity, or nouns. I said, yeah, there are good people who suffer, and there are bad people who flourish, and stop saying it's a big deal. Quite interesting, right? Okay, of this attitude. Any comments so far? Were you surprised with, yes?
That almost sounds like an atheistic basis of things, so I'm confused why the rabbis would want to put that in, other than another perspective.
At the very end of the book of Ecclesiastes, they added few verses. And the few verses basically said that Kohelet was his name. We call it Ecclesiastes, but he had the name. This man who was the richest person and the smartest person and had the most power just realized that the only important thing is to trust in the Lord. It's not the message of the book at all. It's like somebody copied it from somewhere else and pasted it. But this is only a partial, I don't like not to answer questions, but yeah. It's really one of the most fascinating books to read. If somebody wants to immerse in a book and to struggle with and to have fun with too, because as you can say, you can really have fun with Ecclesiastes. This is the one. Okay, so this is a completely different extreme. Everything is nonsense. Nothing has a meaning, so stop with these questions and be happier. And the next book that I am going to spend most of the time on is the book of Job. The book of Job deals directly and explicitly with the question of evil. Many believe, from ancient readers of the book to contemporary scholars, that the book of Job is not a historical account. It's a fiction, but for a purpose. It's a fiction that was written to deal with this huge question of why do good people suffer? Ready for that? I included the entire first chapter because it's really important to have a full background and not just me telling you what was written. Who wants to read the first chapter? Loud and clear. If we can move, if we can just pass on the mic to Karen, please. Do you all see the book of Job at the bottom of the page?
Oh, where it says argument? No.
No.
The book of Job.
Again, I forgot to include page numbers. I'm sorry. I'm so excited when I'm done with the document that I just print it and say, I should. What about the page numbers?
Okay. The book of Job. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters.
Okay, just 1 second. So it's very clear from the very beginning. Job was perfect, right? Blameless, upright, feared God, shunned evil. Okay? Basically 4 times the same idea. So nobody will decide to interpret anything. No. 100%, perfect man. Okay? Please continue.
He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East.
Okay, so even it's not about a Jew, it's not about a person who lived in Israel or anything, right? This perfect man was very wealthy, but still very, very good. Everything was perfect.
His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them.
Even the kids are nice to each other. I mean, what?
When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom.
Okay, so what about his children? When they had the party, and when we party, drink too much or whatever, we may do something wrong or even think something that God would not approve of. So what did he do? Immediately he sacrificed on their behalf and he asked God, even though we don't know that they did anything, just to play it 100% safe. Okay, he took no chances with his relationship with God. Okay, here we start.
Okay. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.
Thank you. So now the scene moves where? To heaven, up there, right? And it's not the only reference in the Bible that God is there and God has a pantheon, a group of some helpers. Okay, and one of them was Satan. Satan in the Jewish tradition is not the same as the Satan in other traditions. Satan his job is to illuminate the other perspective. So God now is quelling about Job, right? He said, oh, look at Job, I'm so proud of this guy, he's perfect, right? And Satan is one of these people. Satan's job is not to say, hey, God, you're right, you're a God, you're such a great God, but always to come up with an argument against. Therefore, we call it the devil's advocate. Okay, this is the reference. It's not that this is necessarily your opinion, but that's your role. Okay? You have to give the opposite argument. Okay, so that's Satan in our tradition. This is different than Christian Satan and Muslim Satan. Okay, the last class I will do some comparative analysis of the three religions. But this is the Satan. So when God says Job is great, what is Satan going to say? God, let's. But I'm not going to read. Who is reading now?
Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.
Okay, so what is the Satan saying to God?
Yeah.
More than, why is Job so good?
Because he has everything.
Life is good. Why not being good? That you have everything in life. You never had any challenges. You have everything you want materially. You have perfect children who invite each other to their birthdays and they play nicely. Of course it's good. It's easy to be good when life is good. Okay? But challenge him and let's see. Yeah, I think I went too far with the...
Yeah.
Yeah, don't trust me with that. Sorry? Okay, so that's Satan. So let's challenge him and see if he'll be so perfect. Let's continue.
The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, what did he say? Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing.
Okay, quite cruel, right? So the Satan has to make a point, and when Satan gets permission to act, he goes all the way. So it started with some property damage and ended up with the death of all the children. So Job, from having a beautiful family, having all these possessions, has nothing now. And what was his reaction? God has given, God has taken away. It's a line that we say in every funeral. Okay? And the last line, in all this Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. He accepted it. He accepted it. This is not the end of the story and the Satan, and things will continue. But this is the perfect backdrop against which our discussion continues, because we know for a fact that Job was perfect. And still, God allowed him to suffer greatly. Nobody can think of greater punishments, greater suffering than the suffering that Job was inflicted by, correct? And the rest of the story, we are reading about his friends. Job had friends. By the way, a lot of the mourning customs in the Jewish tradition come from the book of Job. First of all, what did he do? He tore his clothes. Okay, when we do a funeral, we tear the clothes, or in our country, most of the time, we have a black ribbon that we tear. Okay, so he tore our clothes. And we don't use the sackcloth anymore, but we sit on the ground. Not many of us use the ground, but some of you probably remember the Shiva boxes, right? To be really uncomfortable. So don't sit on your nice cushioned sofa. Be uncomfortable. That's part of it. Okay? And what he was doing later on is sitting Shiva. That's what you do. You lost everyone. You're sitting Shiva. He did not blame God. He's sitting Shiva. And then his friends are coming to talk to him. Before, we'll go to his first friend Eliphaz, but the nice thing there is that he was sitting on the ground. They came and sat next to him. What did they say? Nothing. They waited for him to speak. A very common question I get from people, especially after a devastating death, is, I don't know what to say. I'm afraid to go to the Shiva home because I really don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Sit and wait for the mourners to talk to you. And if they don't talk to you, your presence is enough. That's all you can do. Mm-hmm. Don't talk, because most likely if you'll say something, it will be the wrong thing. They don't need your interpretations right now. So the friends of Job started well. They sat, and they sat for days. But then the conversation started. And they feel the need to fill the void of the explanation. How come such bad things happen to Job? So let's go to number 2, to Eliphaz, the friend by the name of Eliphaz. Whoever wants to read.
Remember who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. For affliction does not come from the dust, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. But people are born to trouble as sparks fly upward. As for me, I would seek God, and to God would I commit my cause. If you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. Is it for your fear of him that he reproves you or enters into judgment with you? Is it not your wickedness great? Is not your wickedness great? Are not your iniquities endless?
What is Eliphaz saying? Thank you. Suffering doesn't come from nowhere. You may think you are perfect. Again, Eliphaz did not read the background to the story. He said, you probably don't know, but you did some bad things, because God would not just punish you for no reason. Okay? The only thing you can do is to repent. Even if you don't know for what, you're a human being after all, and you probably did something that upset God greatly. So instead of thinking that you're the victim here of an unjustified punishment, you're not. You're just a sinner. Okay? Is not your wickedness great? Are not your iniquities endless? Yeah, you're just a sinner. You hid it well from everyone else, or even from yourself. You don't know, but you must have done bad things, because God would not do such a thing to a good person. Okay, so this is one way to deal with it. Okay, when you go to comfort someone who lost a loved one, don't use this argument. You deserve it. You know, you've been smoking all your life. No, don't do that. But sometimes it's tempting, even if we don't say it, right? When people tell me about tragedies, for example, people had lung cancer. If they didn't smoke, that's the first thing they say. We never smoked. But when you say that, you'll say, had I smoked, that would have been a good punishment, a fair punishment. But I didn't. Okay, or a car accident, you hear people say, he was not a driver. Okay, because we need a cause for bad things that happen. But when a person who was very healthy and didn't smoke and worked out and ate good food is sick and dies young, we don't know what to do with it. Not just theologically and religiously. It's shaken. Because we think if we'll just do all the right things, we'll be good. And for the most part, it works, but not always. And when it doesn't work, oops. Okay, so here Eliphaz is saying, oh, you've done bad things. You don't know or you don't want to admit, but that's between you and God. Just repent and move on. By the way, Job's wife, because then other bad things happened to him, he got some horrible skin disease, and she just told him, just curse God. And then give God a reason and he'll kill you. Stop suffering. That was her way. You know, you can get into a situation in which you can say, I don't want to be here. But he refused to do it, but that's not part of them. Okay, the next friend is Bildad.
Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the power of their transgression. See, God will not reject a blameless person, nor take the hand of evildoers.
Okay, what is he saying? He said, okay, let's assume you did not do anything wrong. Why do you suffer? Your children. Okay, you suffer because of what your children did. Which takes us to Isaiah. Remember, sometimes we are punished for somebody else's sins. It's not exactly like Isaiah, but he says, you know, even if you didn't do anything wrong, perhaps these children that you raised, you didn't do a good job or good enough job, they sinned and you pay the price. Okay? That's what he says, because again, the same concept, God does not punish without a reason. And all the suffering that befell upon you must have a reason. So I agree, maybe you didn't do anything, but your children did, and you're paying the price. Which in real life, it's often true, because parents pay the price sometimes for children. What people say often, that you're only as happy as your least happy child, something like that, right? You know, they do think, but also the other way around. When we parents mess up, our children pay the price. But here we're talking about theology. It's not just that it happens, but God punishes for your children's sins. Let's go to the next friend.
His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays.
I'm sorry, let's go to number 4, Zophar, the next page.
Oh, sorry. But that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom. For wisdom is manifold. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? This is the portion of the wicked from God, the heritage decreed for them by God.
What is he saying here, in other words?
There's a reason, but you can't understand it.
You can't understand it. You're a human being. Your perspective is so limited as a human being. Who do you think you are who tries to understand how God functions? It's huge in Islam. Okay? Huge. Again, I'll elaborate on it in some other classes, but who do you think you are? Our perspective is so minimal, we don't understand. God does what God does, and so you have no right to question God, which is not mainstream Judaism, because we are the people who constantly question God. Okay, from Abraham, when God was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham said, God, you cannot do it. It's not right. You're supposed to be a just God. You're not. Okay, so we have a tradition. Even the name Israel is the one who struggles with God. Okay, we struggle. But here he says, who do you think you are? As a human being, your perspective is way too limited to understand. So just shut up, take it, and move on. And let's go to the next one, Elihu, the next friend.
For God speaks in one way, and in two, though people do not perceive it in a dream, in a vision of the night when deep sleep falls on mortals, while they slumber on their beds, then he opens their ears and terrifies them with warnings, to turn them aside from their deeds, and to keep them from pride. He spares their souls from the pit, their life from perishing by the sword. And if they are bound in fetters and in cords of affliction, then he declares to them that their work and their transgressions, that they are behaving arrogantly. He opens their ears to instructions and commands that they return from iniquity. The Almighty, we cannot find him. He is great in power and justice, and abundant righteousness he will not violate.
Okay, so this is a little bit more nuanced here. Basically, he says that God sometimes punishes us in order to educate us, to warn us from doing even worse things. Okay, so even if you don't understand, God has a plan here. It can be educational. Okay, he will punish you so you won't transgress even farther. And let's just go to the next one, and we will end here with God. I think it would be appropriate to end with God. Who wants to be God today?
Go ahead.
Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding.
Okay, that's, I just summarize. Just look at this verse that Hillary just read. What God is saying.
Don't question.
Yeah. Where were you when I created the world? You think you understand something? You understand nothing. So now you are questioning me? Do you understand the way that the world functions? You understand the physics? You understand physics of the world? You know, we really understand nothing. So why do you think you have the capacity to understand the way that I act morally, the way that I act with regard to people? You don't. So it's the same thing God says to him. You're just a mortal. So don't be so arrogant as to assume that you have the capacity to understand. We're not on the same level. I'm God. I created everything. I created you. So it's not just I don't owe you any explanation, but even if I have, it's way beyond your ability to comprehend. That's who you are. Now, we finished the whole book of Job, but do you find any of that satisfying?
No.
So I'll tell you one thing that I learned many years ago. When there's more than one answer, it means that none of the answers is absolutely satisfying. 2 + 2 = 4. There aren't opinions about it. Okay? Math is simple. Here, we already today, just by the sample of passages from the Bible, we encounter 4 or 5 different ways with which to understand the question of suffering, which means that we don't have even one good answer. Next week, we're going to continue with the rabbis. Okay, by rabbis, I'm talking about if the Bible, let's say, covers very schematically the years of the third millennium, from 1000 BCE to, let's say, 300 BCE, the rabbis will start with the Second Temple. And the stories that we will read and the arguments some of them will remind us of the Bible, but will take us to different places. Okay? Did you have fun dealing with suffering? Thank you. I appreciate you coming tonight.